Welcome to Decoder Talks, the show that deciphers the hidden layers of Brazilian and global politics, unafraid to expose the uncomfortable truths that mainstream media tries to hide. I'm your host, and today we're going to dive deep into a hot topic: the U.S. visas revoked from the Supreme Federal Court, STF, justices. We're going to analyze not only what has already happened, but also the possible new measures the United States might take against this rogue dictatorship that has taken hold in Brazil. We'll call out the hypocritical media, the cowardly and corrupt congressmen, and expose this empty talk about sovereignty that doesn't put food on anyone's table. And of course, we'll look ahead to the future. Is there a risk of institutional rupture? What political forces are at play? And what about the Magnitsky Act, which could drop like a bomb on Alexander de Moraes and his allies? Get ready, because this is going to be an unfiltered analysis, well-researched and with some hard truths. To put the Brazilian political scenario in July 2025 into context, we need to understand that the country is going through one of the most serious institutional crises since the return to democracy. Everything started to escalate after the 2022 elections, when Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva defeated Jair Bolsonaro in a race full of controversies, including accusations of irregularities with the electronic voting machines and widespread distrust in the electoral system. Bolsonaro, idolized by millions as the myth, left power claiming political persecution orchestrated by the judiciary. The Supreme Federal Court, especially under the leadership of Alexander de Moraes, became the center of this storm, conducting investigations that many see as lawfare, the use of the law as a weapon against opponents. Moraes, for example, led investigations into fake news, threats to democracy, and the events of January 8, 2023, when thousands of protesters stormed Congress, the Planalto Palace, and the Supreme Federal Court itself in protest against Lula's inauguration. These actions resulted in mass arrests, censorship on social media, and account blockages, affecting not only Brazilians but also American companies, such as Elon Musk's X. Meanwhile, the Lula government deepened alliances with global authoritarian regimes: China, Russia, Iran, and Venezuela. Lula openly criticized Israel in the conflict with Hamas, calling it genocide, which angered Washington and Brussels. Economically, Brazil is struggling. Inflation is above 8%, the dollar is hovering around 5.80, unemployment is at 9%, and there is a dangerous dependence on Russian diesel imports, which are now under European sanctions that make everything more expensive, from agriculture to transportation. Movements such as calls for out with Moraes protests are emerging in cities like Belo Horizonte, with a demonstration scheduled for July 20th at Praça da Liberdade, organized by Direita BH, and isolated pot-banging protests on social media, echoing popular discontent with systemic corruption and the perception that the Supreme Court acts as a superpower, violating the separation of powers. Congress, dominated by the corrupt Centro, shells impeachment requests and anti-corruption reforms, while dissatisfied military personnel murmur in the barracks about the instability. On the international front, Donald Trump, re-elected in 2004, sees parallels between his own persecution and that of Bolsonaro, pushing for sanctions through allies like Senator Marco Rubio and Congressman Eduardo Bolsonaro, who acts as a lobbyist in Washington. This extreme polarization, Lula's left consolidating power through the judiciary, and the radical Bolsonaro right escalating in the streets and online, creates a cauldron that could boil over into an institutional rupture. Now, the explosive event that set all this off, on July 18th, 2025, the United States Department of State announced the revocation of visas for 8 Supreme Court justices, as well as judicial allies, citing serious human rights violations, censorship, and political persecution. This measure, unprecedented against the Supreme Court of an allied country, is a direct response to the censorship imposed by the Supreme Court on American platforms and on United States citizens living in Brazil. According to official American sources and reports from Reuters and O Globo, the cancellations specifically affect judges aligned with Moraes' controversial decisions. Here is the precise list of Supreme Court justices whose visas have been canceled. Alexander de Moraes, the epicenter of the controversy, accused of orchestrating a witch hunt against Bolsonaro and censoring X. His visa was revoked first, and this was extended to his immediate family, his wife Viviane Barsi de Moraes and 3 children, Juliana de Moraes, Gabriela de Moraes, and Alexander de Moraes Jr. Research from sources such as X Profiles and press reports does not confirm that the children are currently studying in the United States. Alexander Jr. is involved in professional activities in Brazil, and the daughters do not appear in public records of American enrollments, but the restriction blocks any future travel, including educational or tourist plans. Luis Roberto Barroso, president of the Supreme Court, has been criticized for expanding censorship in court rulings. His family is also affected. Barroso has a daughter, not publicly named in official sources, but mentioned in posts on X as possibly residing in the United States, which could result in deportation if she does not leave voluntarily. Barroso, who studied at Yale Law School in 1989, now sees his historical connection with the United States become ironic. Edson Fashion, rapporteur for cases against Bolsonaro, like January 8th, has aligned himself in controversial votes on freedom of expression. Dias Toffoli, president of Supreme Court, has a history of decisions favorable to Lulism and has been complicit with censorship. Carmen Lucia votes with Moraes on media and expression issues, is now also barred along with her family. Dilmar Mendes, though appointed by FHC, aligns himself with Moraes in cases involving blockades. Posts on X confirm his inclusion on the list. Cristiano Zanin, appointed by Lula, his former personal lawyer, is seen as a bridge between the executive and the judiciary. Flavio Dino, another appointee by Lula, former Minister of Justice, has taken pro-censorship stances on social media. The ministers who were left out, Luiz Fux, Cássio Nunes Marques, and André Mendonça, seen as more conservative or appointed during the Bolsonaro era. In addition to the 8, the restriction also affects allies such as Attorney General Paulo Gonet, the Director of the Federal Police, and even the President of the Senate, Rodrigo Pacheco. According to lists circulating on X, immediate family members are included. Wives, children, and close relatives, creating a ripple effect. In Barroso's case, his daughter in the United States is the most frequently cited example of personal impact. For Moraes, his entire family remains in Brazil. An irony for someone who blocks profiles in Brazil. But this is just the beginning. The United States, under Trump, could escalate with drastic measures. Sources in the American Congress, like Rubio and Maria Elvira Salazar, are proposing laws to deny visas to those who violate the First Amendment. Suspension of satellites? It's feasible via SpaceX. Limiting GPS or Brazilian communications due to security threats affecting aviation and banks. Ban on flights over America? Airspace restrictions would force expensive routes. Others include asset freezes via the FAC and embargoes on commodities like soy and ore. Trump has already imposed tariffs on Brazil before. Now, with lobbying from Eduardo Bolsonaro, this could become a reality. The Magnitsky Act is the heavy hammer the United States can use to confront human rights violations around the world. This legislation allows for tough sanctions, such as freezing assets abroad and travel bans against individuals accused of serious corruption or systematic abuses. Senator Marco Rubio has been strongly pushing for its application against Alexander de Moraes and the other 7 ministers affected by the visa revocations, citing censorship and political persecution as the main reasons. There are clear precedents with Russian judges who were punished for similar actions. And in July 2025, the State Department is actively considering this possibility. I would say the chance is high, around 70%, which would financially isolate these ministers by freezing assets in the United States and allied countries, leaving them even more exposed internationally. Just imagine the irony: judges who impose restrictions in Brazil now unable to access their own assets abroad. We need to wake up from this collective coma, where judges crown themselves as Olympian gods and sovereignty is just a disguise for the horror show we call justice. Let's dissect the latest tragicomedy of 2025, which starts a few days ago with a syrupy little letter from Barroso to the United States. This rejected love note, reeking of desperation and hypocrisy. Yes, that minister who treats the Constitution like a used tissue, sending messages to Trump as if he were some operetta diplomat, while the world laughs at our tropical circus, as if the President of the United States, the boss, needed a little moral lesson from an arrogant little tyrant. Let's get to the fact that fills me with visceral disgust, as if I were sitting next to the worm who governs us. Barroso, the maestro of selective justice, releases an open letter on July 13, 2025, titled, "In Defense of the Constitution, Democracy, and Justice," whining about different worldviews and blah blah blah, as if Trump were a rebellious student in need of a cheap moral lesson. He swears up and down that, in today's Brazil, no one is persecuted, while the Supreme Court orchestrates a manhunt worthy of a mafia movie against anyone who dares to challenge the establishment. Oh, please, Your Excellency. And now, a few days later, Trump tears up the guy's visa and his family's too. Barroso's daughter will have to come back from the United States. Possibly their assets in America will be frozen. But I think the justices would have already sold their Miami houses and taken their money out of American banks. What a shame. At first, it breaks my heart, but my feelings don't matter. I'll be strong. What worries me is whether he thought he was going to lose his visa to the United States. So, will this support for the chief little tyrant, Zandalia, continue from now on? Now that they're all without visas, did he feel the sting? I mean, the drama? Is there going to be a split now? From the beginning, I thought so, but I have to admit my naivety. I assumed Barroso was smarter. Not at all. I don't think he even suspected this would happen, so much so that Barroso left the United States 4 days before the visa revocation was announced. No one is that dumb. Well, the fact is, it seems to me now that the message is clear. Trump is the man, he's no fool, and he's already made his move. 8 scoundrels, both men and women, were hit at once. A split is inevitable now. I'd say this pack of rats is going to start leaving Zandalia all alone with his stone-cold pen. I'd say that, when it comes time to vote to convict Bolsonaro, a lot of those little ministers are going to get cold feet before casting their vote. That is, if they even make it that far. But now I ask, with a sarcasm that stings like lemon on an open wound, does Barroso still believe the Magnitsky Act won't come crashing down on his head and the other 6 filthy Supremes? This American tool, which freezes assets and turns corrupt officials into global pariahs, is being pushed by Rubio like an unavoidable anvil, with precedents against Russian judges who reek of authoritarianism. The White House sent a clear signal with the revoked visas. It could be that these 8 heralds of Banana Republic democracy lose not only their passports to Miami, but also see their fortunes evaporate like dew in the sun. I bet they will, because these worms underestimated the boiling point. They never imagined it would come to this, but Trump plays like a cold chess master, moving pawns while these rogued ones waltz on the sinking Titanic. So they send the ambassador in Washington, Maria Luisa Viati, to try to reverse the situation with the White House, but they told her, too late, meaning it's already too late. What a pity, folks. And just look at the rotten irony that makes me want to throw up. Barroso's little letter barely arrives with the gringos, and boom. The federal police, that disgusting puppet of the system, raids Bolsonaro's house on July 18th, 2025, with search and seizure warrants authorized by Moraes himself, seizing $14,000 and 8,000 reais in cash, a cell phone, a flash drive hidden in the bathroom, and even a copy of a petition against Zando in the United States. Was it expected? Of course, only the naive Bolsonaro didn't see the train coming. And I can even justify it. He's a good-natured old guy, catapulted into the presidency without preparation, like a clown in a circus full of beasts. Not even Lula, that thieving mollusk and ex-con, was ready. But at least he knows the foul corridors of politics, the alleys of corruption where the rats multiply. Bolsonaro? He stood aside, didn't clean up the trash around him out of naivety or fear of getting his hands dirty, letting the system devour him alive. I'm sure he didn't expect this Orwellian dystopia, where the Supreme Court turns into a monster that devours freedoms. But blaming only Lula, like Nicholas from Our Young Right does, is pure innocence. Chandelier was put there by the system, and only the system will remove him when he becomes more of a problem than a solution. The more chaos and economic fracture, the better for the puppet masters. I'd bet that everything was planned, just like most banana republic democracies that the globalists want to bring down and that are falling apart all over the world. A tyrant is installed in a nation already infested with corrupt people in power. They force conflicts and divisions, and voila, the balance of idiots keeps the pot simmering slowly, cooking the frog without it jumping out. Understand this, my dear exhausted friends. The more division, the easier it is to destabilize society. One side yells coup, Srenia, the other dictatorship, and no one sees the bigger monster, the system that sucks us dry like an obese vampire. The tyrants give speeches in defense of democracy, silence voices, fill prisons, and mute social networks. Look at Bolsonaro now, forbidden from accessing social media, from speaking to his own son, wearing an ankle monitor like a dog in the yard. But relax, it's all in the name of saving the rule of law. This garbage of a structure that suffocates us, draining lives to preserve sovereignty, or is it just arrogance? The cowardly press either applauds or stays silent, and the business people, some are complacent, others are running from the economic cliff Brazil is about to fall off in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, the people crawl and the rigged institutions laugh in our faces. Pure revolt, a disgust that rises up the throat like bitter bile. I'm fed up with this farce, where betrayal is routine and manipulation is the air we breathe. But calm down, friends, no blue U.S. passport or little red European one. Well, I do have the little red one, but even so, Europe is an economic mess, and if it's to be a laborer over there, I'd rather live off Bolsa Familia here. Just kidding, I don't get any benefits from the state, and it's better that way, because handouts make you apathetic. You can only eat, and that doesn't get you out of your comfort zone or the zone of systemic dissonance, where thought clashes with ignorance. Just one more prophecy. The sanctions will come, one by one, like stones thrown into the mirror of the waters of freedom until Shandaquisto starts to bubble. But the problem, as always, is that those in power never let go of the bone. And who's going to foot the bill? Guess who? It's the common people, of course. If things really boil over and the social pressure cooker threatens to explode, the system knows what to do. They give Chandelier a vacation. He disappears from the map, maybe goes looking for a bit of dignity wherever it still exists. Meanwhile, not even the show goes on, and in the next act, the system already has its pawn, Tarcísio, just as much of a scoundrel as any other the game's owners might choose. But in this case, he comes dressed as the peacemaker, the one who brings Greeks and Trojans together, right and left, all under the illusion of reconciliation. But be careful, Bolsonaro must nominate Michel. After all, the son is in exile and no one else has the charisma to embody the myth. And Michel, go fight, of course. She will try to get her husband out of prison, whatever the cost. There's just one problem. The system can't allow it. So get ready, Tarcísio is coming. And remember, it's not you who chooses, it's the magic boxes. Data voice, sorry, data folder, bumps up the numbers, globo trash makes the graphs jump, and the cattle. Oh, the cattle believe it. When the electoral circus rolls into your town, watch closely, see who the media idolizes, and run from them like you'd run from the plague. Ah, sorry, it won't make a difference. He's going to win anyway and will keep making things easier for the leeches who helped him win the election. What a shame. Brazil without audited voting is just a rehearsed play with idiots in the audience. So, buddy, the only way out is still Guarulhos. But hey, don't lose hope in this fatalistic cynicism. Maybe, just maybe, this is the spark, the rupture, the turning point. Maybe the people will wake up, slam their fists on the table, and flip this banquet of hyenas. Or maybe not. Maybe we'll just keep simmering, divided, foolish, and smiling while they fry our future. And you, listener, are you going to swallow this one too? Or are you going to spit fire? Share, comment, and subscribe to Decoder Talks. Here, the unvarnished truth comes unfiltered and raw, and biting sarcasm is truly the last desperate gasp of sanity in this chaotic, tropical dystopia. We will see you next time, hopefully, if they even allow us to speak freely until then.